everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I teach you all about painting miniatures and everything in between for all steps. Yes. And this is part 29. I can't believe we're already here. Weathering pigments. My favorite type of pigments. So we'll start off by asking the question, of course, what are weathering pigments? Pigments are essentially what give paints their color. So they are powdered versions of paints. They are paints without the medium, essentially. So they are super concentrated colors. That's what you're basically saying. And they come in a variety of colors, and a variety of companies make them. Now, I personally prefer Secret Weapon pigments. They come in a variety of colors. There's like 20 different ones. And they can mimic rust and dirt and smoke, oxidization, basically anything that you want to apply to a miniature. And they are excellent for applying weathering techniques to your miniatures, make them look older, more decrepit, worn out, rusty, etc. But basically, as I said, they're just highly concentrated pigment powders. Now, why would you want to use weathering pigments as opposed to a variety of other methods that you can use to weather your miniatures? Well, there are actually several good reasons. Besides the fact that they are relatively cheap per color, they're only a few dollars each Canadian, they're very easy to use. I'll show you two methods today on how to use them. Number two, they're very quick. And number three, they produce very realistic effects for rust and dirt and dust. And they're very easy to apply to a miniature. And as I said, I'll show you two methods today. I'm going to apply half to one side of the miniature, half to the other, and you can decide for yourself what method you want to try. A downside to pigments, they are messy. They are really, really, really messy. Since they're super concentrated powders, if you spill them anywhere, it will ruin a lot of stuff. Trust me, I am a messy person, and these things are messy. So today, we're going to be applying weathering pigments to make this Orc Death Dread look a little bit more orky and rusted out and just old and worn out. Because right now it's Death Skull's Death Dread. It should be way rusted out, more than it is now. And right now all I've done is I've made the metal look a little dirty, and then I've applied a satin varnish over to the entire miniature, because it's always a good idea to apply a satin varnish before using something like an alcohol. And now when using pigments, you gotta decide, first question, are you gonna be wet or dry application? You can apply the pigments just by themselves. Number two, if you're gonna do a wet application, are you gonna use water or alcohol as a fixing agent? And number three, are you going to pre-mix it with the agent or apply the agent afterwards? And I'll be showing that in this part today. So method one, I like to call the quick and clean method. Now, in both mine, I will prefer to use a fixing agent because it just turns out better and it creates a longer lasting appearance. Number two, I will prefer alcohol for both of them. I like alcohol as a fixing agent as opposed to water. It dries up much quicker and produces a much better effect without diluting the pigments. So for the first method, we are going to apply our pigments. We're going to put our pigments into a palette, mix them, and then apply our fixing agent to the pigments first, and then use that mixture to apply that to the miniature. Now this method is much cleaner because the powders will be contained in a medium, and you can easily apply that. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to take our rust red and our rust brown, as well as our dirty brown, and put them all into a palette together using just a brush. And there's our clay brown. Once again, we're going to add it to our palette. And as I said, for this method, we're going to take our fixing agent, which is going to be our isopropanol, and we're going to mix it with the pigments, and then take this mixture and apply it to the miniature. Now, the reason why this is so quick and clean is, as I mentioned, the pigments are constrained in the medium, so they won't go everywhere. So we're going to take our isopropyl rubbing alcohol and just add a bit of it into our palette, enough to actually create a mixture. And this bottle does not contain paint airbrush thinner, it has the alcohol in it. So add a bunch of drops to it, and then mix it all up with that same brush, just to get that nice, almost thin down paint consistency. But you'll still be able to see the pigments within the medium, which is really cool. And now another rule with pigments is that the more pigments you add to the mixture, the better. So whenever I do rust, I always do the rust brown, rust red, and the dirty brown in there, because it just adds even more. It gets infinitely better when you add more colors into the mixture. I always usually do 2 or 3 whenever doing pigments. So now I'm just going to take this mixture and add it to the parts that I want. As you can see, I'm just choosing parts of the model And as you see, the alcohol does dissipate really quickly. And after it's dissipated, we're going to take a simple dry brush and buff it out. But I'll show you why. Because the downside to this procedure is that though it's quicker and cleaner, it tends to be really patchy. There's very clean, defined lines between where you apply the paint and where you don't. And on top of that, it also can be much stronger. So a way to fix that is to slightly blend it. After the paint has the alcohol has dissipated a bit, take your dry brush and just buff the surface. So put it against the surface, and not only will this spread the pigment a little bit more out, it will help remove that patchiness, but as you can see, there's still some clear defined lines, and it also removes some of the pigments that weren't fixed, dulling down the appearance. Because you don't want that strong of a red. You want all the pigments to be able to show. Another downside to this particular method is that it tends to blend the colors a little bit stronger, so you won't get the tonal variation as you would with the other method that I'm going to show you today. But the other method is much messier. So as you can see here, the rust is really showing, and now we're going to repeat this procedure on the other gun. Take our mixture, apply it to the gun wherever you want. Try to change up the size and the appearance of the rust, obviously, because rust does not go in a uniform motion. But as you can see, there is some great tonal variation still. You can see some hints of brown, some hints of red in there, and that's what we're going for. These pigments do really produce really nice appearances. And then we're going to let it dissipate for a little bit, dry up, and then buff it a little bit with our dry brush. And that way it will just remove the patchiness a bit and tone it down and make it look really nice. And that's the first method. Let it dry. And now here's the second method, the messy but better method. Now why I say it's messy but better? It's messy because we're now going to apply our pigments directly to the surface and then afterwards fix them in place. So now the pigment is going to go kind of everywhere, and that's why I've laid down a towel, because it will be messier. As you can see, the pigment kind of goes a little bit everywhere. So with the pigment, apply as much or as little as you want. Feel free to just, put it directly to the surface, or you can just flick it very lightly onto the surface depending on what effect you're going for. And also definitely vary up how much you're adding to surfaces. Add a lot to some, light to others, to show different levels of rusting out for the surface. So we're first going to do this with our brown, and then we're going to take our rust red and go over the same surfaces. And this method, this is actually the one I typically use whenever I'm using pigments, because it's much better for showing the individual colors, and it has some great tonal variation to it. You'll see the reds and the browns a lot easier. And on top of that, by adding the alcohol afterwards, it really does spread them out, and it has less of that patchy look to it. It really does blend really nicely. So once again, we'll add our brown and then mix it slightly on the surface. That way it's not just overwhelming the reds. And then afterwards, I'm going to dip my brush in a little bit of rubbing alcohol, which is also in a palette, and just apply the rubbing alcohol now to the surfaces that I just put these nice pigments on. This method also tends to take a little, as I said, it takes a little bit longer because you're doing individual parts one at a time, applying it to the surface and then fixing it with the alcohol. But as I said, it does produce a better appearance in the end and a lot less patchy. So now I'm going to repeat this procedure on the other weapon. First apply the brown, and then the red, and then the muddy brown. And I just really want a heavily rusted out appearance, so I'm applying a lot to the surface. And here's the brown. And then afterwards, I'm going to fix it in place once again with the alcohol, the isopropanol. You can actually, as I said, you can literally just apply the pigments to a surface without a fixing agent. It just won't last as long of an appearance and tends to be a little bit less bright of an appearance in the end. And then I'm going to take my brush and once again just remove some of those excess pigments that weren't fixed, and this will also once again help blend it slightly better, though you'll notice the appearance of this particular claw is much nicer than the other one, but the other one took much less time and was also much cleaner. So as I said, there's pros and cons to each method. Feel free to try either one and see which ones you prefer. And it looks really nice. So in the end, here's what the final product looks like. Obviously, it looks way more rusted out and decrepit than it did before. On my left and your left, you will notice the side that I did the second method with, the messier but better appearance. And on the right is the first method, the one where I just applied it. I mixed it all together at the beginning and applied it. So it's a little bit more patchy. As you can notice, the left side, or R facing left, is going to be a little bit cleaner, and now R facing right is going to be a little cleaner. But in the end, both of them produce a very similar appearance. So it's up to you. Try them both out and see which one you prefer. Also, feel free to try it without a fixing agent as well and see how you like it. That's the great thing about pigments. It's no real, you can try a bunch of different methods and they all produce slightly different effects, and figure out which one is best for you. And that's what it looks like. As you can see, it's really rusted out. The pigments did a great job, and it now just looks a really rusted out, worn out Def Dread. And that's what I like. So thank you so much for checking out this episode of Miniature Painting 101. And stay tuned for part 30, which is just around the corner. But if you can't wait, check out The Warp. Click on the link below for a free 14-day trial to my premium YouTube channel, where not only will you get to see the next 6 months worth of episodes of Miniature Painting 101, you'll also get to see many start to finish painting tutorials, tons of battle reports, and just some awesome wargaming content. So go ahead and check that out if you wish. And thank you very much for watching. Till next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.